Gamers Podcast. This is episode 95. We are here. It is episode 95, rounding out, coming closer and closer to 100. This is the week of E3. We are coming early this week. This is a Sunday evening. EA had their little bit of EA Play and a press conference. We've had Microsoft's big reveal, and in another hour or so, we'll have Bethesda's press conference. Getting kind of late at night, but so this is a different schedule for us this week because it is E3. So we're going to be broadcasting and coming to you on Sunday night because we've got some news to talk about. We're going to skip Monday's broadcast because it's going to happen right during the Sony press conference. But we will be back here on Tuesday for a wrap-up of the Sony, for some more discussion about the Sony press conference, and maybe even some discussion about that half-hour Nintendo Direct that they're teasing as well. And then we will be back for our Thursday newscast. And our newscast will probably be more of an E3 wrap-up this week as we kind of figure out what games we've missed, right? We've got some other things. There's always a few things that get kind of trickled out on the show floor, things that are not big enough for one of the big press conferences, either from the platform holders or the game publishers. So we'll see about that as well. But tonight, this was the big question mark coming into E3. We had Microsoft. We had Project Scorpio. We knew that it was going to be unveiled. We knew that we were going to get some information. Lots of bookies out in Vegas trying to figure out what that price point was going to be. But Zeus, we've got a name, we've got a price point, and we've got a release date. Are you satisfied with it?
No, not overall. So I'm happy with the release date. I am happy that we got to see it. I was it's kind of interesting how they did it because Prime and I on one of the lead up episodes had talked about tried to game out like how they were going to do this, and the way they did it was a scenario that I mentioned. It wasn't the one that I recommended because and we can come back around to it at the end. But I kind of really wonder now how you feel if you are an OG Xbox One or Xbox One S gamer. Because the press conference was all Xbox One X. And as you mentioned, we did get a name, so I did appreciate that. I think we even got a name before Phil even came on stage. They in their opening role, which was a lot of marketing, but it kind of wrapped up showing the console, and I think the name was on that screen. So I'm glad we got a name. I'm glad we got a release date. I'm not happy with the price because I was one of those people betting in Las Vegas, and I had called $399. Right? It's gonna be interesting to see how it plays out. I understand the power, but now it feels like they've been beating that into our heads for the last 3 months because they were drumming themselves up to a $499 price, and they wanted people to feel like it was justified. And again, like I have tons of faith in Phil Spencer, but I don't know how this $499 price point plays on the market, considering we're right back with how this whole console generation started, and that price point is the thing which has resulted in them being, 40, 50 million units behind in terms of sales. So I don't know what this does. I think the only people, I'm already thinking that, or was thinking that the only people who buy this are people who already own an Xbox One, right? It's their upgrade. I don't know the numbers of people becoming new Xbox owners and stepping immediately into an Xbox One X. I just don't know. I think those numbers are fairly small. So I don't know, DB, what do you think about the price?
Yeah, the price, it is, I expected it. It is the economically sound price point. It is not the competitive marketplace price point that I was hoping for. I was right there with you and hoping for a $399. I thought that it certainly would give them a better shot at kind of breaking into this, at least chipping back away at the 2-to-1 sales that they've maintained over, or 1-to-2 sales, right? That this is Xbox we're talking about. So for every 2 PlayStations that have been sold, we've got 1 Xbox being sold. So yeah, and as somebody who's sitting here with the big brick OG Xbox One, it's something I am interested in, but at the same time, I don't feel like they gave me a strong enough pitch for what it brings differently the besides the horsepower of graphics. And I think that's the challenge, is that it's straddling this line. I think it is the right move for them. I think they need to get something that's more powerful, we are in year 3 of this cycle, and ideally this gives them a faster refresh. It puts them a good couple teraflops ahead of the PlayStation 4 Pro, and it presents them and sets them up in a way that they can continue to refresh this box in a way that the marketplace can respond to in terms of horsepower, in terms of technology. But the challenge, I think, and it's been the challenge from the very beginning for me, is if you're always going to be playing the same, that every game is going to play on this 2014 box or 2013 box, right? And it's also going to play on this 2017, 2018 box. It's gonna look good, but is it gonna change things? And so I think that's the question I have. Certainly we've got some information about things looking good. We've got 30 4K games that they listed, or at least they said they have 30 games ready for free patches. Again, a free patch should be expected. This is exactly what PlayStation Pro has done as well. They listed 4 or 5 Microsoft exclusive titles that will get the patch. Gears of War 4, Halo 5 was not in there, and that was one of the rumors that I had heard coming into this, lead up into this week. So yeah, I think they did what they had to do, and I will be interested to see what this moves in terms of units. And so that's kind of where I'm at with it. But I think they certainly gave us a lot of good-looking games over the course of the press conference.
Yeah, and before we run on to the games, I just want to run down a little bit more of the hardware really quick of the things that to me stood out.
Yeah, please do.
Because I'm in a different place than you are. I'm on the edge of feeling like the price is justified. Like I said, just from a competitive standpoint, like you mentioned, I just was hoping for $399 because look, this is the conversation I have with Xbox naysayers, and I was actually just in a Twitter back and forth with my former editor in chief at Geeks Worldwide, who was like, "Does anybody think Xbox One Scorpio is going to make any difference?" And I was kind of giving him like the litany of reasons why I think it would, but. He came back and said, "No, your argument's rational. I'll wait and see, and I'm interested. I just have never been given a reason to leap yet. And this $499 for so many people is going to be the reason to not go that way." But so there's 12 gigabytes of GDDR5 RAM. So this is the latest speed of RAM that is available on the NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1000 series cards. It is fairly nascent. I believe those are the first cards to come out with it. Everybody and even AMD cards that were running alongside it were running GDDR4. So good that that's representative of a lot of bandwidth, and it's 12 gigabytes. I believe I'm going to double check. I believe the top end GeForce card right now, the NVIDIA GeForce GTX 1080 Ti, I think only has 11. So this to me is the first time that a console is going to be coming out of the box exceeding what current GPUs are capable of. Now that's if we don't inject another card into the lineup before the end of the year.
Question for you there. So one of the things I was reading in the run-up to this was, they were saying they've got 10 gigs that are usable for games. So we've got 12 gig card, but we've got some of that devoted to other processing power in terms of the RAM.
That's certainly feasible, and I'm pretty sure the same is the case on other GPUs, right? That some of that is just the cost of doing business, right? Analogy in a systems engineering world, some of that RAM is consumed by system resources to utilize to simply run the card. So you're right. I don't know that it's a direct one-to-one comparison, and the only way we'll know is when we see what kind of frame rates we get out of games, when they actually come out. So it's good. It also has HDR, like what we would expect, but unlike the PlayStation Pro, it does do the 4K UHD Blu-ray playback. You would think that Sony would be able to do that with a firmware update, but they have yet to do so. So as of today, it's an advantage. The other thing is compatibility across hardware. So every accessory that you have for the Xbox One now works on Xbox One X. This is the thing that hooked me, and this is why I'm pulled over the edge of, oh, maybe it would make sense to get it. So I don't have a 4K TV yet, but they made a very specific mention of by Kareem Chowdhury, the head of Xbox software engineering, specifically went through this graphic and some quick gameplay that showed this super sampling that they have, where they sample 1080p video multiple times, so that even if you are still on a 1080p TV, you're going to see what appears to be a graphics upgrade for your games on the 1080p TV. That is a voice track that I don't think I heard from the PlayStation 4 Pro. At least I think later it came in later, but I don't know. It was kind of lukewarm to me back then. So this kind of makes me more interested in getting an Xbox One X. And I think the last thing is built on 16 nanometer technology. So I need to check. I think the latest processors, Kaby Lake processors, might be on a 14 nanometer technology, but this is still pretty doggone low for a console. So all of those things are impressive. They're the kind of things that some gamers in the tech space like to see, but may kind of fall out of the public view as far as what advantages they provide and why it makes the console more valuable. So.
So the super sampling it's something that was patched in with many of the PlayStation 4 Pro titles.
Right.
But I think that the difference here, at least from what I've been reading, is because of the horsepower underneath the hood here, that oftentimes on the PlayStation Pro, you were swapping, you were choosing between super sampling and some other pieces, that there were always trade-offs about what it really was in terms of that kind of up-resed version. And so because of the horsepower here within that graphics card that you're talking about, I think that it allows the Microsoft team to do a lot more with it. And so as much as I am kind of lukewarm on it in terms of a consumer end product, it's a beautiful piece of kit, right? I mean, it is a really nice piece of hardware. It puts them in a really good space coming into the next couple years. But I think you're right about what you said, though. For some people who have yet to pull the trigger on an Xbox, other than if they've got a 4K TV and are really itching for some good-looking games,
right.
Those people, these are probably going to be more early adopters than anybody else. But for people that have not made the 4K TV switch, I think there is some sampling, but you have a big library of PlayStation 4 games. I don't know that this pulls you over yet. And it will be interesting to see how the games that they've announced kind of come out and what else they add to them. What is going to make that super sampling better on the Xbox X than it is on PlayStation Pro.
Right, and you mentioned how beautiful it looks. So supposedly it's the smallest Xbox ever. I like that, but I'm definitely curious whether or not it's actually smaller than an Xbox One S, because we just shrunk it last year. So maybe like a millimeter or something smaller. That's still good. The thing I guess that I found the most interesting was the liquid cooled vapor chamber. So this is actually a console that you're buying that is liquid cooled. Now they said vapor chamber. They didn't talk about how it works. I'm hoping that means that there's no actual liquid inside the box, that that before it's pumped through and goes over the electronics, that it is actually vaporized. So it's some gas with some kind of loose water vapor in it, or water molecules in it. I'm not a huge fan of the concept. I haven't gone liquid cooling on PCs because I just have an inherent problem with the thought of pumping water through an electronics enclosure, and all of the possible bad things that could eventually lead to over time. And I definitely don't want that. Not crazy about that in an Xbox One, which is a thing that I won't be going into, right? At least with my PCs, every few months I go in there to insert a part or take a part out. So yeah, let's talk about games.
Yeah, so let's move into, well, first off, before we talk about any new release
Oh,
games, I
sorry.
want to just throw something at you in terms of they did announce that they're going to do original Xbox backwards compatibility, right? So this is going to be something there, and they've been talking about how you could play it on your original Xbox. You could play it if you own it on Xbox 360. If you own it on Xbox One, that all three of those platforms could play with each other as well with those games. At least that's what they were kind of pitching at the end of the night here. So they didn't really, give us a big rundown of what those games are, how many of those are going to be first-party games versus, third-party games. A timeline on that I didn't really see, but I think it's another neat piece of how much they're trying to focus on who their Xbox faithful are and give them another reason to stay in the family.
Right. So they didn't give him a specific date, but he did say, and he said it with a lot of emphasis in his sentence, that it is later. It is later this year. So yeah, and at first, as I'm watching him go through it, I'm like, who is this for? And I'm like, everybody, again, as we normally do with backwards compatibility, right? Everybody's yammering about, I want it, I want it, I want it. And then I'm like, I can't go through a list of games in my head from the OG Xbox that I want to play. So it's this neat capability, but I don't know what I need to do with it. Then he says Crimson Skies. And I'm like, okay, you got me, right? I mean, this is the game that I miss playing on my Xbox One. It has never shown up backwards compatible. I think it may have shown up on the Xbox 360 very, very late in its life cycle, but I'm not even certain that it did then. So that's great. My only fear is please don't use that as an excuse for not doing a proper sequel, because we're still all waiting on that. But that in and of itself is pretty exciting. If I could see Crimson Skies. Now, the issue, of course, is we didn't have digital downloads back then, so I don't know how they know that you own it. I'm assuming for Xbox One titles, you're just going to have to buy them again, but hopefully they'll be really cheap.
Yeah, I would think that or at least they're going to be creating a marketplace for that,
Right.
so that it could be, some kind of big push there. I know Phil Spencer has been a big um, Crimson Skies fan. I've heard him on other podcasts and other things talk about that. So this seems again kind of like a pet project. But it'll be interesting to see how this rolls out, right? They've done backwards compatibility well. I think the piece of it that you talked about in terms of people clamoring for it, but how much people actually use it, this comes right on the heels of the Ars Technica article from just last week about looking at use on Xbox Live and backwards compatibility games. They're in the single digits in terms of percentage of use, right? And then we've got Sony's US head telling us that backwards compatibility, that's just not, people talk about it, but it's not something they want. So this seems kind of in stark comparison to that. But again, I think it gives them a one more way to talk about this kind of suite of games and the family library. So we've got some other classic, or not classic, but long-time Xbox franchises here, right? We get Forza 7, which we knew was coming. That was always going to be a high-profile one coming out with the Xbox One X, and also Crackdown 3. So finally, after going dark for a little bit, we got a nice big Terry Crews trailer and some splash scenes. Again, very stylistic. Both of those games look to be running pretty beautifully. Then as we move off to some games that are maybe not as big, but we've got Sea of Thieves. They did a nice gameplay demo there, but Sea of Thieves is not coming until next year. So we're not going to get that rare kind of multiplayer pirate game until 2018. I think one of the big Microsoft gets in terms of games for me was PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds. That this is kind of the big hot streaming game at this time on PC. How long it sustains itself, right? It will be a question, but there was a lot of speculation about who would plunk down the money to have an exclusive, whether it be PlayStation or Xbox. And I think because of the hardware of what the Xbox is, to me it made a whole lot of sense that a PC only game coming over to Xbox was probably the easiest conversion for this game. So any of those games of those big titles that kind of struck a chord with you, Zeus? Forza, any thoughts there?
Um, so I'm just going to go by your checklist because I can't remember what order you did them in, and I don't want to miss any. So PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, it's an interesting thing you mentioned. I will say, so the PlayStation 4 is built on the same architecture. It's x86. I would agree with you that it's more akin to a PC implementation if a developer's already done it, because on between PC and Xbox, that also puts them on DirectX. I thought that was a huge grab to grab that as an exclusive, and not only to grab that as an exclusive, but to get I can't remember what his name is, but Bruce, is it Bruce Greenwood?
I think so. Bruce Green, the developer. Yeah.
Yeah. So I actually listened to an interview with him, Brendan Green. I actually listened to an interview of him fairly recently. Really doesn't like the limelight. Like, very much an introvert. Is kind of uncomfortable in this new role as having to be the public face of that development team. So big scoop just to get him on stage at something as large as E3. I thought that was a big scoop to land that game. One thing is it was one. There were several games here that didn't seem that refined in terms of graphical fidelity, and this was one of them. So for some of those, I'm not quite certain that it really benefited Microsoft a lot to show them. But
I think in this game, it's kind of janky on the PC as well. I think that it runs on a variety of systems. It's not a high-end kind of graphical gameplay, and part of its appeal is that it can be played through, on a lot of systems, regardless of their horsepower. So,
right.
Yeah, I've even heard people talk about turning all the display settings down so that they can get a better frame rate, because that's going to be beneficial in terms of their gameplay.
Right. So no firm date on that, but it does come out in 2017. It's kind of a weird two-step release process. So it's coming to Xbox One, just as a baseline version, and then later they will add in Xbox One X enhancements. And when he mentioned that, the note that I wrote down is, so that's how you wind up having games on a system. That's how you wind up having Xbox games that are not all the same games. Right, when you have versions of the game, or I guess it'll be code that's in all the games, but where they have those Xbox One enhancements. And PlayStation does the same thing, but I just don't think that their marketing language isn't quite the same. But again, the one thing I dislike about this press conference is it did definitely come off as, hey, those of you who are going to buy the Xbox One X are going to become our first-class citizens. Those of you who are still on the Xbox One S and Xbox One, you will now become the second-class citizens. So we'll just have to see how that goes. Crackdown 3. Yeah, go ahead.
Can I ask about that for a minute? Because as you're saying that, I think that this is also it's a public show. It's also been a trade show. That as we're coming into the holiday season, as we think about the fall, how do they market this? Because I think you're exactly right that this is the Xbox One X is the console for Microsoft at this stage. Does the Xbox One S become the slim family console that gets bundled with their 4K Minecraft updates? Is that right now it's $199, right? That it's had a $50 price drop for a period of time, that it becomes this kind of gateway in for a wider market.
Yeah, I honestly don't know. I literally got done watching the press conference like 2 minutes before we went on air. I don't know, because that was the question I asked when Prime and I were talking about how do they play this at E3. And one of the things, so the model I had pitched was that they do the opposite, right? That they lead out of the gate talking about games, and primarily talking about games just in reference to just playing them on Xbox One, not doing the differentiation, showing what the games are going to look like on an Xbox One or One S, and that midway through the press conference, they do a flip and roll, bring out the Scorpio, start talking about its hardware, its price, its release date, and then go, and this is how games are going to look on Xbox One X, right? And even if you're, you pick and choose those games carefully so you're not replaying the same games over again, but you spend some time stroking the ego of the people who are not going to make the jump. Because $4.99 is not cheap for a large percentage of the gaming community, right? Those of us who are in probably the older half of the gaming demographic might be able to afford it. And I have to question, right? I'm still trying to go through the rationalization in my mind. Like, is dropping $4.99 on a new variant of the Xbox One like really the right thing for me to do this year? So they played it definitely differently, and like I said, I feel like they bifurcated. I felt like the answer to your question, DB, is I felt like this was where they were supposed to do that, and they didn't. So the answer to what do they do now, I don't know. And I guess I feel the one thing I will give to Phil Spencer and Microsoft, this age of Microsoft and that Xbox division, is they own it, right? When they make an error and they need to correct it, they own it. But if they make a decision and a choice, they also own that. So I guess my only feeling is they need to own it now, right? And just focus on servicing people who are going to be on Xbox One X and just giving One S and One owners, whatever there is as a byproduct.
So let's keep moving down that list of games. Yeah. The other thoughts there, Zeus?
So Crackdown 3, and I'll try and go a little faster. Crackdown 3, thought it was awesome having Terry Crews do that intro. That was hilarious. Is that a change in graphical style, or is that how Crackdown 1 was? Because it looks like cel-shaded now?
So it's always been kind of cel-shaded, right? I mean, cel-shaded on 360, it doesn't look nearly as beautiful as cel-shaded on Xbox One X. But yes, it's always been kind of heavy black line, cel-shaded. It was Crackdown 2 was a little bit of a different art style, but still in that same vein.
Okay. So Forza 7 I really liked. I think the interiors look amazing. Turn 10 was obviously going to do a great job with it. As far as the press conference itself goes, I thought it was awesome that that the first graphic you see is of a female driver, and that they actually brought out 2 female professional drivers to kind of do some of the gameplay. I caught trucks in the gameplay trailer, and I was like, oh, that's interesting. So the second half of the Forza 7 reveal, I wasn't so hot about. They brought out Dan Greenwald, the creative director at Turn 10, and they revealed the Porsche 911 GT2 RS, and spent some chunk of time talking about the car, which I appreciated. I'm glad he kind of swerved away from, because I thought he was going to talk about the car for like 6-10 minutes. He didn't, but I was kind of like, this isn't what I need in the press conference. The thing that was interesting from a business perspective is Porsche signed up for a 6-year partnership with Microsoft for Forza. That's significant. Like a German company committing to a 6-year time frame is not small beans. So I thought that was pretty awesome. One of the story chapters in the Need for Speed series is that they did a Porsche Unleashed version that focused entirely on the history of Porsche. It was an awesome game, highly detailed and very differentiated in the physics model between the cars. So maybe we'll get to see some of that. So, and it clocks at 60 frames per second, has 700 cars, and it is a cross-play title. So, and the release pattern is a little weird. That game comes out October 3rd, then the X, I'm probably going to still wind up calling it Scorpio, but then the X comes out November 7th. So you can buy the game early and sit around and wait, and then pull it down to your One X, I guess. So.
Yeah, I think that makes sense, right? And I would assume that the vast majority of X owners are going to be current Xbox owners as well. And so having it now, getting it out, finding that October slot in the release schedule makes a whole lot of sense. That's normally where Forza ends up at. It also gets it away from kind of the first person and the sports games release schedule. So it's a good spot for it. Over 100% attachment has shown us anything. People will sit on a game as they wait for something to play it on.
Yes, Legend of Zelda. Sea of Thieves demo, I was not very impressed by.
Yeah, no, I really like the idea of it, but I've never been plussed by it. And I guess I'm kind of glad that it's coming out in early 2018 because I don't
Right.
think it has the cachet to hold up in a fall release schedule. So giving it something where it's in the winter, maybe the window's a little bit better. It has the potential to be a good kind of streaming game, a good co-op game. That there could be a good community about it, but it also could be, you know, it may not land. So
Right.
yeah, I'm not so sure about that one. So another game that's going to have that is coming is State of Decay 2, the zombie survival. Right, this is PC and Xbox One. So again, this looked solid. Its first State of Decay had a lot of good kind of parkour aspects into it as well. So this is coming this fall, I believe. And then I'm going to turn to what was teased at the EA press conference is
So
BioWare's new game.
yeah, and just a bit. So State of Decay 2 is actually spring 2018.
Thank you for the correction. Yes. Which, so I say that and I make that face, right? Because it also feels like I don't know what those big first party or exclusive games are that are coming this fall that makes somebody who's not an early adopter get too excited.
So I guess I kind of feel differently about that. Like, it was tough in the press conference. And I think you and I may differ. So we definitely differ subjectively on how many of these titles are exclusive. I came away from it feeling like almost every title they showed was exclusive because they kept saying world premiere, Xbox One exclusive, or Xbox One X exclusive. And I may have just lost track. Um, but I mean, I guess to me, what I would say is, make no mistake, this is a full-on new console launch in terms of the way it's being handled as a business. This is not some mid-cycle upgrade. It's not the PS4 Pro, right? It's being handled as if it is their next generation console, and there's a slew of games coming out for it that roughly match the pattern of past console launches. And I think I actually wrote the numbers down here. So it was, because you mentioned earlier that it was so it's 42 games, 22 of which are exclusive. So it's 22 exclusive titles that I equate to. There are 22 titles specifically coming out for the launch of the Xbox One X. And most launch lineups aren't even that big. So
yeah, that's a pretty solid launch lineup, right? I think that's a very good point. That if you think about this as a launch of a platform, yeah, they get a little bit of each of their titles. That Madden running on the Xbox One X looked beautiful. That they've got those big games they're going to hit each of those genres.
right.
So yeah, I can see that. I think my hesitation is exclusive because aren't also most of these cross-platform, or not cross-platform with Sony, but cross-platform with PC.
So I guess there are different people in the community who handle that taxonomy differently. I believe that in the industry, that the definition cross-platform is only within the console ecosystem. So PlayStation can have a title and we'll call it exclusive even if it comes out on PC. I believe kind of in the industry it's accepted that PC is just a universal platform and doesn't directly compete with consoles. And so when they say exclusive, it typically means that it is exclusive to Xbox, PlayStation, or Switch.
Yeah, I think you're right. I mean, I think that is when they say exclusive, it means that it's console exclusive. So.
Okay.
So yes, I agree with you there. So yeah, no, I think in terms of a good launch lineup for the fall and for the holiday, I think I can see your point about that they are hitting those boxes in terms of getting games out there for people with their new hardware.
Right, and so for me, State of Decay 2, number one, this was one of the games that I specifically noted did not look to me like I would label it as an Xbox One X game. So I think it's fine for them if they wait till the spring, because I feel like it needs some more spit and polish. So hopefully they'll have time to do that. It's an interesting formula. What I wrote down, it looks like the game is The Division meets The Last of Us meets Left 4 Dead meets Grand Theft Auto. So a little bit in there for everyone. Looks like it'd be a nice team play game. Hopefully they can get the graphical quality up.
So we are kind of we're past our half-hour point, but we're going to keep moving through some games here. And I want to see if there's some games here of these kind of cross-platform ones. Now, as we defined what cross-platform is, thank you, right? These are going to be things that will be released on not only Xbox, but also on PlayStation. That we've got Anthem. We've got Anthem, which is the new BioWare game from the original BioWare, or at least from the current BioWare, Mass Effect, Dragon Age people, that this was their kind of open world game that's been rumored about coming in 2018. Looks kind of a cross between kind of post-apocalyptic Destiny, Monster Hunter-y almost a little bit, with some mechs. So that looked beautiful. Not a lot of details there. Assassin's Creed Origin, again, we knew that was coming. They're showing it running on the Xbox One X, and it does look, again, it looks really beautiful. Metro Exodus. So this was a nice surprise for me, right? Because we had Metro 2043, right? And Metro Last Light. Good, solid games. They're always on Xbox. They were also on PlayStation. Didn't run nearly as well on PlayStation platforms, but on the PC they always were kind of pushing the graphics in terms of what those engines were doing, and this looked beautiful. Zeus, did you have any thoughts on Metro? And do you remember, is it cross-platform or is it Xbox and PC?
So I believe this is being labeled as Xbox exclusive. I would reckon maybe that just means timed, but it's possible Microsoft could have sewn them up, right, with a healthy payment. This was a nice surprise to me because it was like third in the show. So I think it was Forza 7. Actually, I think it may have been second in the show. So it was really impressive to me that it was that that early in the show. Looked great. You kind of had to sit there, and I think you had to watch the entire trailer. They didn't firmly reveal the name. But there were little things, right? Like at one point he comes out and you see a Hind helicopter. So if you're familiar with that being an old Soviet design that has propagated, and then he lifts up a little, like I guess it's his moleskin notebook with a chart and things on there, and that's got Russian writing on it. So it looked awesome.
Yeah, no, it was beautiful. Yeah, and it was a long demo as well,
yes,
right? I mean, this was a over 4 minute trailer, and so this was a big reveal. It was a big exclusive. So yeah, this was one that I had not heard a whole lot of rumors and rumbling about. So it was nice to see what those guys have been working on.
Yeah, and we're going down the list kind of in order and kind of sort of order of priority, but it's not how the show went. So Anthem was what they used, I think, to close the show out. Big deal, right? This is by EA, who had just had their press conference yesterday. Have you watched the EA press conference? Did they talk about Anthem in their own press conference?
Yeah, so in Anthem, at the EA press conference, they did a little teaser. They did just kind of a rendered trailer and said that the first gameplay would be revealed today at the Microsoft press conference.
In similar vein to what you mentioned about Metro Exodus, same thing. It was a pretty long gameplay trailer. I feel like this is their Destiny, right? It definitely evokes feelings of Destiny. It evokes feelings of Titanfall. I felt a lot. Titanfall 2 specifically, rather, in terms of the single player campaign. And it has a little bit of Crisis in there too, right? So I feel like you're going to put on these suits and you're going to feel very powerful and very superhero-like. At first, when I saw those similarities, I was like, this is going to feel like so much of a rehash. But in retrospect, I think I'm like really interested in this game. And it'll be interesting to see what EA does, because clearly, so this was what the big publisher that we mentioned had what we felt like was this kind of, I guess, thinking back on it now, I think we said all the publishers had a kind of anemic lineup, between EA, Activision, and Ubisoft. That we flipped on that a little bit when Ubisoft did their like secondary announcement of what they would have at the show, but EA felt very slim. So this is I feel like this is a healthy addition to the portfolio, and I'm really interested in. You get a jetpack, so that should automatically catch people's interest. So I thought that looked good. And did you mention Assassin's Creed Origins in this section?
Just a little bit, yeah. So
Okay.
go ahead. Your thoughts on that? That was another big kind of gameplay, lengthy gameplay there.
Yeah. Not a ton. So I thought it was interesting in terms of the lore. If people are big into that the voice track on the story content is these are the first assassins. So this is as one might guess with the title, this is the origin of the assassins guild or clan or whatever you call them. And Egypt is a great place to do that. And as far as like historical timelines that like catch my interest, this time period is one of them. So this is the first Assassin's Creed that I feel like I've been genuinely excited about. There's this one scene where they have Bayek, who's the main character, sliding down the side of a pyramid, and it just looked awesome. But by the same token, as they were playing the gameplay demo, there were two things I picked up on. Number one, games on Xbox One, or maybe it was just the way Ubisoft's graphics were right now, when you were looking at the horse and the horse went into the shadow, I'm like, that horse cloaked in shadow looks exactly like it would on a non-4K system. So it made me think about what are developers going to do when your game is dark, right? When there's very minimal lighting, and you don't really see like the colors and things pop off of things. So it just made me think that I think daytime games will look best on Xbox One X, and I'm interested to see how people handle like darker games, like an Arkham. But yeah, other than that, I thought it looks awesome, and I'm looking forward to it. That game comes out October 2017.
Yeah, so again, I think that looked beautiful, and it's a really good point about kind of that HDR, the lighting aspect there, how that works, and this game certainly is going to show that off in terms of the sunlight and a lot of light colors there. So we've got a handful of kind of more indie titles. So I just want to run through them as we're getting close to our 45-minute mark here. So Ashen is a action RPG. It was announced back in 2015. I didn't remember it at all. Looks like it could be some co-op, kind of dungeon crawly. Not a whole lot of information about it. Very kind of cartoony type of art style. Same thing with Darwin Project. So this again had some cartoony art style, but it also fits very much within kind of the PlayerUnknown Battlegrounds, within kind of the Hunger Games. It was a quick trailer, a teaser in terms of kind of a battle royale, right? It plays out like the Hunger Games. It'd be interesting to see what that does and how that chips into, what distinguishes that from PlayerUnknown's Battlegrounds, because they both seem to be playing into that same niche. Last Light was a little kind of arty, looks like a narrative game. It feels very Blade Runner-y, or at least looks like that with some of the neon. Last Night is a Namco game. Some type of action RPG vampire type of piece here. Again, not a lot of these have dates. One of the things I loved about the next game here, Artful Escape, is this was a PC game coming out now on Xbox as well. Looks kind of cool. Little bit of puzzle action platforming, but they said that it's coming out when it's ready. Right? They're not giving you a time frame. They're not going to let you know. It's just going to be there when it's ready. Unlike Cuphead, which has been announced years ago, and finally we get a release date on Cuphead, which is September. So that's a nice piece there. And the last kind of indie game that I had, and you had a couple others that you caught, but I didn't even catch them, Super Lucky's Tale. This is the Oculus Rift piece, and this is, whether or not we want to talk about Lucky Paul, but this is kind of a cartoony platformer game that's going to be in VR, and that was something that we didn't hear anything about, I don't think, right? Is any type of VR discussion. We got some Minecraft conversations, but did we have a lot of conversation about VR? There was a lot of speculation coming into today.
I don't think we heard anything about VR in the press conference. So, yeah, definitely minus 20 for my score on this, because I thought that was going to be one of the big reveals at this press conference.
Yeah, no, it seemed like it as well, but it could be maybe something that they hold out for another point in time, or it's something where ideally I could see Microsoft not wanting to align with any one platform, whether it's Vive or Oculus, and kind of let this third-party headsets and platforms develop, and so they could just support a variety of units.
Well, I thought that's exactly how it was going to play, but again, it feels like if that's the way they're going to go, the time to announce it is now, right? They had the build conference where they had kind of announced these headsets and the creators update for fall. You're not doing it now. You're ceding that conversational space to Sony, who already has a VR headset in the field. You have no more opportunity to really show it off to the US/North American audience. Big time gamers will see it if you do it at Gamescom or TGS or whatever, but the vast majority of the US isn't. So I wonder if these headsets have just started to arrive and are available. Production units or near production units are available for the Xbox team to work with, and there are some things that they don't have nailed down yet.
Yeah, I think that was a surprise for lots of reasons. There are a couple other games that were mentioned here at the end, and Zeus, you had them as well. Can you talk about them a little bit? So Robocraft, Raiders of a Broken Planet, a couple games, again, a nice kind of selection of niche genre types of pieces.
Yeah, they were really short clips in kind of this sizzle reel of going from game to game to game to game, kind of in this section where they were starting to talk about indie games and third-party titles kind of were jammed together. So I think it's Robocraft Infinity. I don't think it's Robotech Infinity, which is what my brain was trying to force my eyes to see. So I think it's a third-party game. It just looked like a lot of mech combat, which is always good. Raiders of the Broken Planet, if I remember, looked kind of a bit like a not quite cartoony, but leaning in that direction, kind of Team Fortress looking thing. So that caught my attention. What really caught my attention was Osiris New Dawn, which was a sci-fi, and I definitely saw you piloting kind of a single-person spacecraft in that. So a little spacecraft simi kind of title. And again, I felt like that's good and just something that happened to catch my interest.
So we have just passed our 45-minute mark, Zeus. Is there anything else? These are my notes from the show. I'm trying to remember if we missed anything else. I'm sure listeners out there are going to tell us about some things that we missed. You just watched it a little bit before you got on here. Is there anything that you recall, things that stick out to you that we hadn't hit yet that you want to?
Yeah, I'm just going to try and really quickly vomit the remainder of my notes that we may not have gone over. So one thing that was mentioned as far as I caught it, my understanding is third-party games for Xbox One X are on pre-order in the Xbox Store today. One thing that I thought was interesting during the press conference that I wasn't too hot about was the press conference was inherently about a 4K UHD system, and it seems like there were pockets of time where we spent a lot of time on 2D fighting games. I kind of thought that was kind of pointed in the wrong direction. One thing that I really liked that Phil Spencer did that I will compliment him on, I mean, I didn't feel like this was a bad press conference. I just felt like there were a couple of missed opportunities that could wind up revealing themselves as critical down the road. But what I really liked about this press conference and what Phil Spencer did, he really kind of just got out of the way, right? And yes, he was the principal Microsoft representative on stage, but he did his opening remarks. He turned it over to Kareem, who came out and really gave you the rundown on the hardware, really did all the reveals. But then Phil just kind of kept popping out, and he was literally on stage for probably 60 seconds to 2 minutes at most. and he just came out in between big game like set pieces. So there were pockets of reels of games, kind of 6 to 10 at a time, and then he would come back out and talk. So I think in his mind, I think he would definitely say, this press conference for them was about the games. So yeah, and like you mentioned, backwards compatibility on OG games. So and the only other thing I had on my notes that we may not have mentioned is so you mentioned games that were getting free updates. And I can't remember. I think you mentioned Gears. I believe Forza Horizon 3 is also getting a free 4K Xbox One update. So, and there were a few others. I think there were 5 total that they talked about. The other 3 are games that I don't play. And I guess the last thing I'll say is,
so you had Final Fantasy 15. You had some of the third-party games, right? So the first-party games, you've got Gears 4, Horizon 3, Killer Instinct, Halo Wars 2, and the graphical powerhouse of Minecraft. And so, go ahead.
And that was going to be my last statement. Like, we made this. They actually brought out the strategic director or business director or creative producer or something of Mojang, and I'm kind of like, and I didn't feel her presentation was that great. It was kind of a little socially awkward, but yeah, we made this very big ado about having a 4K makeover for Minecraft, and I'm like, but the big thing they announced, the crowd really didn't seem to be that happy. So I feel like maybe they didn't get what she was trying to communicate. But there's going to be some type of tie-in server that allows people to play Minecraft regardless of what platform you're on. So there'll be these big servers that will allow you to play from Xbox One, PlayStation, mobile operating systems, and PC. I think that is kind of a big deal.
I think it's a huge deal, and I say it with my voice cracking, right? I think it's a big piece of that idea, and it's a great move for Microsoft in terms of what they're doing with owning Minecraft and not trying to isolate it, but just acknowledging that it's going to be better if everybody's playing. I was reading a Eurogamer article here just recently, right before the show, and I've got it up now, that the current update is that PlayStation is not on it. They've got a tweet here. We'd love to have PlayStation players among the unified and hope that they can. But right now they've got Windows, iOS, Android, Xbox One, Switch, even the VR devices, but not PlayStation. So
yeah, that sounds like a little corporate friction going on there. That Sony's not interested in being on it if it's a Microsoft-hosted platform.
Yeah, so it'll be interesting to see how that plays, and also, I'm sure they've got metrics in terms of where those big users are, and the platform base of PC, I think, is the huge one in terms of the mod communities, but then having the Android and iOS, I think, makes a big difference in terms of younger players and Minecraft's kind of sustainability. So those are the kind of I think the only other pieces here, I was really hopeful about this press conference, and I walked away interested in the box and thinking about it, not necessarily for this year's purchase, but for a next year's purchase. But in terms of games, I feel like there's a lot I could be playing this fall. But maybe I'm just, it's late, right? And maybe it is, I don't know that there's a lot that got me excited yet. And so that's where I'm at the first kind of night of press conferences.
Yeah, and I can definitely see that perspective, and I don't know that I'm that much further to the right than you are. So probably roughly in the same space.
Yeah, so and hopefully by the time we get to Thursday's show, we'll be feeling a little different. Maybe having the perspective of all the other press conferences and kind of knowing where the lay of the land is at gives us something to talk about. So, Zeus, thank you for the night tonight. I always appreciate the conversation, and the hardware breakdown is key on something like the Scorpio, the Xbox One X, and I'll still have to slow down to say that for quite a while. So we are just coming into our 55-minute mark here, just before the show gets done. If you are still watching this, congratulations. If you're up because you're waiting for Bethesda, you've got another 46 minutes before Bethesda kicks off and to see what's there. Otherwise, we will be back with you not Monday night, but Tuesday. We'll be back. We'll be watching the Sony press conference along with many of you, and we'll have some good conversation about that. So if you've got some thoughts about the Sony press conference, feel free to leave a post. Send us a message. Look us up on Facebook. Again, Abandoned Gamers, you can find us all over the place. But we are looking forward to this E3 and have more to talk about in the days ahead. So Zeus, any final thoughts before we sign off for the evening?
Nope. We'll see you guys Tuesday.
All right, everybody. Thanks again for joining us, and we will see you Tuesday.